Thanks for joining us and welcome to our third session of our Unpacking Common Approach series. I am Lorenza Perrin, Director of Social Finance Fund Implementation at Common Approach to Impact Measurement. And I'm also leading the development of the Common Framework, which is one of our 4 standards we're developing at Common Approach and the topic of today's presentation. So we always start with a land acknowledgement because we recognize that in developing impact measurement standards, our work is very much rooted in history, in power dynamics, and whose voices are heard. So offering a land acknowledgement is part of reconciliation efforts, and we try to make it as personal as possible because we are all working in very different parts of Canada. Donc, je m'appelle Lorenza. I'm a French settler living in Tiohtià:ke, also known as Montreal, on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation and historic meeting place for many Indigenous peoples, including the Algonquin, Wendat, and Abenaki. When I first moved here, I wanted actually to understand this place. So I visited the Pointe-à-Calière Museum, which is really next to where I live. And that's where I actually learned about the Great Peace of Montreal. So it's a diplomatic agreement signed in 1701 between the French and other 3 Indigenous nations to end decades of conflicts and build diplomacy. But I remember at that time feeling discomfort. This history was told through a colonial lens, and I realized how little I have been taught, because in France, we're not told any of this story. I didn't know where to start, and honestly, I still worry I won't always get it right. That discomfort I've come to understand is part of being a guest. I benefit from this place every day, its safety, its beauty, its opportunities, on land where others were displaced or made invisible. So being a guest comes with responsibility to understand that history, to listen, and to help change it. In that effort, what I often do is I turn to the voices of contemporary Indigenous artists. One of them is Natasha Canapé-Fontaine, a powerful Innu poet and multidisciplinary artist. Her writing helps us feel deeply and bodily the impact of racism and colonialism. She writes, Les fils des peuples qu'il a asservis ne se souviennent plus de leur nom. Je n'ai pas oublié le baiser de l'eau, neige solide et blanche. I carry those words with me as a reminder, and I hope they stay with you too. So before we dive in, here's a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to start with a short recap of sessions 1 and 2. Then we'll get into the problem the Common Framework is designed to solve. I then explain what the Common Framework is, how it works, and what it looks like in practice. And from there, we are going to focus on what actions you can take right now. And we have sometimes at the end for questions. So let's quickly revisit what we've presented during sessions 1 and 2. So Common Approach is a standard setter. We are developing 4 standards that work together to support flexible, shareable impact measurement. Each standard actually serves different functions, but together they create a system that works for everyone in the impact space. We hold a vision of a future where actually impact measurement is valuable and certainly not a burden for social purpose organizations, and where funders and investors at the same time can collect impact data and still get the information they need. So in session 1, we took a closer look at how the common foundations provide a widely understood definition of good enough impact measurement. So it's right there in the name. Common foundations ensure a solid footing no matter what your specific approach is to impact measurement. It's not a gold standard, it's what we call a good enough standard. So it sets a minimum standard for organizations that are collecting and receiving data to trust and feel confident in the impact data they're using. Then in session 2, we explored the Common Impact Data Standard. It's a standardized way to represent impact data that helps IT systems recognize and structure impact data in a consistent way. We call this a data ontology. So it's not a tool, it's not a template, it's just really the logic that sits in the background of software and making data easier to share, reuse, and analyze across different platforms. An important benefit actually of the data standard, of the widespread adoption of the data standard, is that it's going to support better analysis. But the thing is, it cannot be done on its own. So this is where the common framework comes in. And that's what we are going to unpack today. Before we dive into that, I wanted just to take a few seconds to revisit a key idea from both previous session. It's that impact measurement is a system-wide phenomenon. It makes sense. What we heard is that good impact measurement practices involve measuring what is useful to you, but in a system, if you're not the only one using the data, who gets to be the you? So whether you're reporting impact, receiving it, or doing both, you're in the middle of a larger system. And in today's system, actually someone usually ends up burdened. So either the social purpose organization that is doing extra reporting, or the funder that is struggling with inconsistent data. So our goal actually is to change that. Common Approach envisions a system where neither side needs to be burdened. Our standards for flexible, shareable impact measurement mean social purpose organization can measure what is useful to them, report this data to funders and investors, and then those funders can use this data for their own analysis and reporting needs. And that's the bigger picture, and the reason we are going to now turn to the common framework. So why do we need the common framework? Across the social finance and social purpose ecosystem, there's lots of impact data that is being collected. But despite all of this data, we still face some persistent problems. One of them is that many organizations are tracking outputs rather than capturing real stories of change. Second one, there's often no clear connection between the metrics and broader impact narrative. Also, it's really hard to compare or aggregate data across organizations or programs. And organizations struggle to adapt their data to different audiences. So what would work, for example, for a funder might not make really sense for a board or for a community partner. And also that's important in today's discussion is that there's no replicable, credible method to bring coherence to all this diverse data. And actually, it's not a problem for just one type of organization. So whether you are a multi-program social purpose organization, an impact investor, a network, a grant maker, maybe a fund of fund manager, the challenge is still the same. How do you make sense of a wide array of data without maybe flattening it into something meaningless or forcing people, even worse, to measure what doesn't really matter to them? So that's what the common framework addresses. It's a tool for those who need to synthesize data from multiple investors, multiple partners, or multiple programs. And it has a key benefit for organizations that are actually sharing the data with those entities up, because it enables kind of bottom-up impact measurement. So social purpose organization can define and measure what truly matters to them and still be part of a broader system where the data can actually be interpreted, compared, or aggregated without actually forcing them into using a predefined set of metrics. So it's really about creating a bridge between flexibility and uniformity. So we're trying to answer those questions that we often hear with the common framework. How can investors synthesize insights across investees without enforcing standardized indicators? How can networks or federations report across different member organizations with different missions? Or how can social purpose organizations with multiple programs avoid siloed data and tell one coherent impact story? These are big challenges, and actually they all point to a need for a flexible, transparent way to organize and interpret impact data. And that's exactly what the common framework is built to do. So what is the common framework? The common framework is a set of guidelines designed to help make sense of diverse indicators. So it outlines a transparent, replicable, and verifiable process for aggregating non-uniform metrics. so report receivers can measure the collective impact without demanding that everyone report the same thing exactly. So in short, it brings structure and meaning to diverse data without erasing what makes the data unique. Importantly, the common framework doesn't prescribe new metrics. Instead, it helps you work with the indicator you already have, whether they come from standards like IRIS Plus or these sustainable development goals, or whether they're custom indicators that have been created by the organization to reflect actually their unique work. And then the framework guides users to group outcomes and indicators into shared themes and sub-themes. And then it creates portfolio-wide or organization-wide views without needing every data point to be exactly the same. And in the end, it helps you generate tailored reports for different audiences, all from exactly the same data set. And actually, because the process is transparent and replicable, it's possible to audit, to validate, and to explain how you got from many different data points to a meaningful impact summary. One important thing is that also the framework draws on qualitative research methods and financial accounting principles. So it's really grounded in real world practice, and you're going to see this later. So just to help you understand what it looks like in practice, the different use cases. So for example, a multi-program social purpose organization can connect outcomes across maybe housing, employment, and mental health programs to tell a unified story. Also, we have cases where there's a specific sector-specific network, like a food or agriculture hub, that wants to identify shared themes without forcing every member to use the same exactly metrics. So the common framework can do that. We also have cases where impact investors want to roll up data from maybe 12 or maybe plus investors across multiple sectors without imposing top-down metrics. This is where the common framework comes in. We also have case where we have fund managers that want to sensitize maybe results across 50 funds using different metrics. So the common framework does that. And the social enterprise accelerator also could be building a collective story across diverse group of ventures, for example. So the common framework allows all of these groups to make sense of complex, diverse data without actually losing the nuance of each contributor's work. Now I am going to show you exactly how it works and how this looks like in action. At the core of the common framework, there are two key principles. The first one is construct-based equivalence. This means we're treating things as equivalent if they are conceptually the same, even if they're not measure exactly the same. The second principle is bounded flexibility. So we don't just lump everything together. We set clear boundaries around what counts as equivalent using rules and principles. And that's what actually ensures credibility and consistency with the common framework. So I'm going to share with you now a helpful image, I hope. So if you look at those oak leaves, they have all different shapes, probably all from different species. They look a bit all different, but still we can recognize them as all being oak leaves. So that's construct-based equivalence. It lets you group different metrics that reflect the same kind of outcomes, even if they're measured in different ways. But what about if it's an acorn, for example? That's conceptually too different. Or what if the leaf is damaged and reflects, for example, poor data quality? So that's where the bounded flexibility comes in. Not everything can or actually should be grouped together. And its important thing is like exclusion are necessary to preserve meaning and credibility to the framework. Now, here's important mindset shift is when aggregating impact data, we are not aiming for precision or perfection, and we actually call it the collective shrug. So estimates and aggregation don't have to be right. They just have to be reasonable based on sound logic. They need to be replicable. So it means that someone else could apply the same method and get a similar result. And they need to be transparent. So it means that they need to be clear enough to be reviewed and understood by someone else. So it's not about perfection. It's really about building trust through clarity and credibility. So how do we do this? So the Common Framework uses a 5-step process. We start by identifying themes to reflect key outcomes. You can use, for example, SDGs, you can use RS+, or you can create your own themes, whatever makes the most sense for your own context. And then you link each metric that you have received to those themes. Next, you try to narrow down your metrics into a smaller subset of what we call common units. It can be like number of people, dollar value, number of services, etc., depending on with what data you're working with. And based on those themes that you have defined and those common units, you can build what we call headline indicators. Those headline indicators, they give a clear summary view across your portfolio or programs. Then it's important you define clear rules for what gets included or excluded and how to roll things up. And so this is where the bounded flexibility comes into play. And finally, you can actually roll up the data, analyze it, and visualize it to share with different audiences in a meaningful way. Now that you have actually seen how the Common Framework works in theory, I'd like to show you what it looks like in practice. We are going to share with you one specific example. This year, we partner with Rally Assets to apply the Common Framework for the 2023 data. I'm going to first start to share a short video, kind of like summarizing how we work together, and then I'm going to build on that.
Rally Assets, a Canadian impact investor, deals with a lot of metrics. They manage multi-asset class portfolios for many clients across numerous funds. In 2023, Rally Assets was working with 47 funds with 171 holdings and at least 494 metrics. Why so many metrics? If all of Rally Assets holdings reported on the same things, wouldn't there be fewer metrics and easier impact analysis? In fact, many of Rally Assets holdings do report on the same things. However, even when investees use standardized metrics from IRIS Plus and B Corp, there are still a lot of metrics. And even if all investors, small to large, had the power to impose standard metrics, there are two key reasons Rally Assets would not want them to. 1. Imposing metrics means imposing an additional reporting burden on investees. And 2. Letting investees use the metrics that are most meaningful to them helps them better learn, manage, and improve their impact, which can lead to higher quality, more authentic data. So what was their approach? To report on all of these metrics, Rally Assets categorized the data based on how much of the portfolio was allocated to the intended impact, what the investees were aiming to accomplish. Their reporting showed how funds were allocated toward the SDGs and larger, mutually reinforcing themes like climate action, advancing social equity, preserving natural capital, and meeting basic needs. However, Rally Assets saw an opportunity to go beyond reporting on intended impact by showing the fund's actual results. This is where Common Approach came in. Common Approach worked in partnership with Rally Assets to implement the Common Framework. Within the Common Framework, they grouped metrics by idea or concept. Instead of categorizing an apple and an orange separately, you group them together as fruit, a common concept. One of the common concepts Rally Assets identified was providing access to employment and entrepreneurship. This grouping included metrics such as the number of women with quality jobs, people employed by circular economy jobs, the number of Indigenous employees, and 24 other metrics. By focusing on their commonalities, Rally Assets was able to use these metrics to tell the story of how many people were provided with access to employment and entrepreneurship. Like any good story, It's more than the sum of its parts. Instead of sorting through disconnected metrics or trying to understand the whole picture based on one data point, these groupings convey the key message, the portfolio's impact, to the audience, portfolio managers like Rally Assets and their clients, in an easily digestible way. Common Approach continued to work with Rally Assets to group metrics, and together, we were able to take 494 metrics and articulate them into 38 headline indicators that show progress toward positive, real-world goals. This lets Rally Assets analyze themes by result, not just intended impact, all without burdening their investees. This is the power of the Common framework.
So to make it a bit more tangible, I wanted to walk you through some of the actual results and visualization from the work we've done with Rally on aggregating impact. So what you're actually seeing here is an excerpt from their 2023 impact performance statements. These are publicly available, you can see them. And what I wanted to let you know is that this visualization shows a portfolio level view with year-over-year comparison across key impact indicators or headline indicators that we've just presented. But the value of this approach goes beyond just annual summaries. Actually, the Common framework enables several kinds of analysis, and I'm going to show you some of them. It can help you, for example, understanding a bit more what's driving impact. So, for example, Rally could see that most of their greenhouse gas emission reduction came from investment in digital infrastructure and particularly concentrated in Fund A. It can also help disaggregating the data. So for instance, in the indicator, people provided with access to employment and entrepreneurship, Rally was able to break down how many of those people were from equity deserving group, where it was actually reported by investees. And it can also help with thematic analysis. So for example, within the theme of quality healthcare, Rally was able to capture multiple dimensions: the number of people reached, cost savings for the healthcare system, and the number of healthcare services provided, all within a single thematic lens. So how did we get those results? So if I go back to the two principles we covered earlier, for example, so construct-based equivalence in practice, for example, under the concept access to employment and entrepreneurships, all metrics that counted the number of people impacted were rolled up into a single headline indicator: people provided with access to employment and entrepreneurship. We applied this exactly the same method for 37 other headline indicators. They also use bounded flexibility. So for each headline indicator, they defined a clear scope and formal inclusion criteria. So for example, if we continue with the same headline indicator, it included people who gain income generating opportunities. So either through hiring, freelance contract, entrepreneurial support, or enabling interventions like capital. They then excluded metrics that didn't really meet this criteria, and they documented all those exclusions transparently. So for example, if we look at the metrics number of users who created a profile on the platform, it was excluded because there was no real evidence that creating a profile resulted in a job, a contract, or self-employment opportunity. So this is the end of the case study. We wanted to tell you that the Common framework is still evolving, so it's being shaped through use. So as more organizations create their own flexible framework, we're going to continue to refine common guidelines, recommendations, and share tools that can help organizations to do that. But in the name, it's called Common Framework, so you must be wondering what makes it common. Think of it like making an omelet. So each organization is kind of like cooking their own version, but every time something doesn't quite really work, we cut off the burned edges. So it means that over time, as more and more flexible frameworks are created, we learn from the community what works best, And eventually those learnings are going to converge into a truly common framework, one that's reliable, flexible, and widely usable. And yes, it's going to take time, but we are well on our way. So what can you do today? So the first step towards using the common framework is making sure you are using the common foundations and the common impact data standard, because it's going to really ease the process of using the common framework. We are not really there yet of widespread support for everyone adopting the common framework, but we are still refining the process with key participants of a social finance fund and a Pathfinder pilot. So you can start preparing in the meantime. We are giving you some recommendation based on the type of organization you are. So for example, if you're a social purpose organization, we recommend that you are adopting the common foundations and that you start storing your impact data using an online software or an online data utility. I encourage you to watch session 1 and session 2 to know more about common foundations and about the common impact data standard. And if you are a funder, we encourage you to use the common foundation as part of your review or your due diligence process, for example, and also start using an online software data utility to receive impact data from your portfolio organizations. Quick recap, common foundations is session 1 and common impact data standard is session 2. The value of the common framework is long-term. So we are still working closely with some organization to create flexible framework that will eventually, as I said, shape the guidelines for everyone. Again, we're going to recommend you some things, but if you're, in the meantime, if you're a social purpose organization, talk to your funders about bottom-up impact measurement and let them know that Common Approach has a solution. If you are a founder, stay tuned because we are going to share learnings, resources as they become available. And if you are part of the Social Finance Fund, we have free support to help you build those frameworks. So if you're part of the program, we encourage you to take advantage of it. And finally, if you want to support this vision of flexible, shareable impact measurement, join our growing supporters page. It's already featuring several social purpose organizations. You can see them here. And we're going to soon be adding a space for funders and other members of the ecosystem. So you can learn more about it at commonapproach.org/supporters. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to start taking questions.